Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Dawg Talk podcast. I'm your host, Harrison Reno, alongside me co-host Dan Kiley, and a special guest today. We got Brent Rollins from UGAsports.com. The professor himself is here in the virtual studio today to talk some ball with us. Guys, I know it's been a while. Dan and I, even Kobe, have had some things pop up in terms of schedule interruptions. So it's been a little bit, but it's almost football season. It's there. I can feel it. The weather's starting to feel like it. So we're going to bring it back to you here today with what I hope is going to be a great episode here with Brent, giving us a little, I guess, preview of Georgia's season and more specifically, I guess, the personnel. Dan, how are you doing this Wednesday evening? I almost said afternoon.
I'm doing well. You're a bit rusty. It's been a while since we've been on here, but we'll get back to it. But yeah, it's been great. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation. Brent, can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us today. So excited to be here.
Good deal. Looking forward. And by the way, and what helps with football, the Braves stink.
Yeah,
like we don't have to. We can just turn our attention to football. So
first time in a while that we can say that. I mean, the last time the Braves have been this bad was 2017, which, if you think about it, was the Rose Bowl year. Just oddly enough, I don't know. Just go ahead and start off with parallels. Don't know how many people would have said at the beginning of that year Georgia's going to be the playoffs. This year, I don't think you'd go as far to say I don't know how if Georgia's going to be the playoffs, but how far will Georgia go in the playoffs? We'll start there with the parallel, but we're gonna kick it off as we always do with hot topics. Brent, since you're our guest, we'll let you kick it off. I know we gave you a heads up on what the questions are since we did as well. But we're going to go ahead and put you on the spot. If you could have the best player in the country at any position, excluding quarterback, which would you choose?
I tell you the person. It's Jeremiah Smith.
Yes.
Give me him. Now, I think if you wanted to debate positionally what it would be, I still think receiver is now, look at the last few years of the Heisman. You've had receivers win it, and you've had receivers be finalists. I think it's 3 of the last 5 years that a receiver's either won it with Hunter and Devonta Smith or been a finalist with Marvin Harrison Jr. The previous 25 years, there was 2, I think it was, Larry Fitzgerald and Randy Moss. So that the receiver and what it's done to this sport, give me Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, 100%. Wide receiver is just the position that has become, an instant difference maker. But just to be a little bit different, just to be on the other side of the ball. And I'm an offensive guy by nature, but I think an elite pass rusher, a guy who can get the quarterback on the ground, would be tremendous to have. And if you had a guy who was an absolute game breaker at that position, just to be different than Brent, I agree with him 100%. Wide receiver is probably where you would want to go. But just to be different, I would say an elite pass rusher.
Man, so we got 2 choices off the board. And I feel like I need to be different as well because I think Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams are probably the obvious choice. Doesn't matter who you have a quarterback for the most part. You're going to be able to get them the ball. I guess, Brent, we'll go really different. Dan went edge rusher. I'm going to go give me the best nose tackle in the world. Just go get me the elite nose tackle. And because really, at that point, he's going to absorb double teams. He's going to free up your other edge rushers. I mean, we saw the story at Georgia. When Georgia's had the Jordan Davis, or heck, I know he didn't play nose all the time, but Jalen Carter lining up at 0. It was different. People had to take notice. People had to dedicate time to trying to slow him down. So give me a nose tackle to maybe just kind of help out what might be a young group.
Especially if they can rush the passer. You think about what Jalen Carter is in the league now. Him and DeMarcus Lawrence, the former Clemson kid, those 2 guys are the best interior defenders, and they are absolute game breakers and game wreckers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we'll go ahead and get started in terms of this conversation. I don't know. Everyone talks about finding the next Jalen Carter, finding the next Jordan Davis. Brent, I guess in your experience, from what you've seen, what's more rare? Is a Jordan Davis type, just total game changer of a nose tackle, more rare to find than a a Jalen Carter, or is it both equally rare to you?
I think both of those players specifically are equally rare. Now, you are seeing, I think, more so the Jalen Carters of the world that are 6'3" plus and at least in the 290 plus, right around 300 pounds, that have elite athleticism and quickness. And by the way, based on early reports and conversation and things like that, and you heard Warren Brinson, I think it was at the pro day. Like, is Elijah Griffin potentially going to be that for Georgia? If he is, the ceiling of this team, I think, just went up a notch. If he's somebody who can come in and give 20 snaps a game and just be, a disruptor of all kinds, whether as a rusher or getting TFLs. But in terms of just your original question, the rarity of that, I think Jordan Davis is probably the rarest of rare athletes. Just at that size to be able to do the things that he could. But he also his impact wasn't a stat sheet impact. His impact was a non-stat sheet impact. And whereas Jalen Carter was from day one a stat sheet stuffer in terms of TFLs, QB pressures, sacks, all that sort of stuff.
Yes, sir. I got a little bit carried away. We'll get back to defensive line. Last one. Which will be more important, what would be more important to Georgia this season? 1,000-yard receiver or 1,000-yard running back?
I think Dan should go first this time.
All right. So, listen, I know Georgia is starved for a 1,000-yard receiver, but I'm going to say a 1,000-yard rusher because I think that Georgia is going to be productive in the passing game. I think they're going to have a lot of guys that can contribute. I don't necessarily think they have to have a 1,000-yard receiver, but I think if they have a 1,000-yard back to really set the tone and really take the pressure off the passing game, to me personally, I just feel like if Georgia has a 1,000-yard rusher this year, we're going to be really, really happy with the outcome.
My initial answer to this would probably be neither, unfortunately, but I actually think I'm going to agree with Dan because their offense isn't built to give one guy the targets and the yardage that you would happen to get with a 1,000-yard receiver. Now, if you look back to Arian Smith's season last year, he's likely over 1,000 if he catches the football. A little more, more so. If you get rid of half of his drops, he's at or over 1,000. So I think like one guy that to me, especially for Georgia this season, that I keep pointing to, and I haven't seen him in person. I just know and then watched his tape from Texas A&M, but Noah Thomas, because I think he's going to can play that Arian Smith role in their offense as a deep threat, but make those catches, make contested catches, and get the ball in the quick game, go be physical. And like he did against, I think it was against Auburn, he took a quick slant, like 70 to the house. So he's one that I think could get there. But for the sake of the question, I'll go 1,000-yard rusher.
I agree. I think 1,000-yard rusher this year is more important because I just think the evolution of – not the evolution, I should say, but I think you're going to revert back to more of what you saw a couple years ago where it's more under center, more play action. You're trying to really build that offense off the run. Brent, I think I told Dan this, and I don't know if I told you this in conversations, but I had a couple quarterbacks when we were at the 5-star camp in Rivals up in Indy for Rivals telling me how Georgia was impressing upon them how, hey, we were throwing the ball at a 30 or at a 63% clip last year. And I asked him, I was like, hey, how do you look at that? Do you look at it as, oh, that's a bad thing, they're throwing it too much, they can't be balanced? Or do you look at it, oh, I want to go play in that because I can throw it 63% of the plays? Neither of them told me they looked at it kind of as like a negative thing, but I'm sitting here in my mind thinking, yeah, if you're throwing the ball at a 63% clip this year in 2025, I don't think that's going to be the recipe for success.
No, especially with who they have at quarterback. I don't think he's built. And when you think about Carson Beck the past 2 seasons and their throw percentage, like a lot, he was, I think last year was right around like 22% screens. Like his elite quick release, get the ball out fast, that was part of their running game. But it just happened to be pass attempts. So, and that's not necessarily Gunner Stockton's game. And that's one area I think you're going to see from a percentage basis where you creep more so back to the 2021 type offense that Georgia had.
And I've never understood a quarterback who doesn't want a good running game. I mean, a good running game will get you out of a lot of trouble and make it a lot easier for you. So I would think having a really solid running game would be appealing for a young quarterback because he could work himself in and it wouldn't all be on his shoulders. So I've never understood a quarterback who's like, I want to throw it on every play. Just doesn't make sense to me.
No, it's not easy. It's a lot of mental energy to do that every play versus, all I have to do is say hut and hand it off. That's
Right.
way easier. Give yourself a mental break.
I guess it's like a pitcher wanting to throw 100 pitches at each game. Like, it's just not going to be, you're not going to like it long term, if you're having to throw the ball that many times. Let's start there with the running game, because obviously that's I think is the biggest thing on everyone's mind. Quarterback aside, obviously, it's the run game. I think that's what we talked about pretty much every single week last year is why can Georgia not run the football? Going back and looking through it, like just turning on, I was watching the Notre Dame game the other night. And the Notre Dame game felt different because in a lot of those other games, when you would pause it at the snap and then pause it again when in the belly of the back, when the ball's in the belly of the back, the picture was vastly different. Notre Dame game was just complete domination from both sides. In the past, Georgia found some success in the passing game, more than I thought they would. But the run game just wasn't there. Brent, over the course of, I think it was 14 games, 14 game season last year, I know it's hard to pinpoint one exact thing. What did you see when you would turn on the tape each week, preparing for Film Don't Lie? What was it that was Georgia's biggest problem?
From a true execution standpoint, if you thought, okay, hey, we're running what we run, and sometimes you think back offensively that you've got to have some, coaches call them bread and butter, however you want to term it, but we got to have some things that we run this no matter what the defense plays, we can succeed, we can run it, and they didn't necessarily have that, and a lot of that was 3 guys, 4 guys, 5 out of the 6, if you include the tight end, would be on point, and one guy would whiff, or one guy would, take a false step. One guy would not get his head across. Just where one individual player became sort of a weak link and it wasn't the same guy all the time, just different players within different plays. But I think over the course of the season, the biggest thing that you want that I didn't see from them offensively was diversity in the run game. They got back to, and I think this is probably the biggest thing if people want to say, hey, Monken versus Bobo over the past couple of years, is they've now become a true 2/3, 1/3 zone versus gap team, when that was the thing especially in 22, where it was basically 50-50. And if your quarterback is not a running threat, to me, you have to have diversity and or misdirection, some combination of that in your running game. And that's ultimately, I said it before the season last year, that I thought for Georgia to take the ultimate step, that was what they needed to get to. Didn't really happen. It's the same thing again this year because Gunner to me is not a threat to run. He's a capable runner, but he's not a threat. He's not someone that I, as a defensive coordinator, am spending time in every period saying, hey, eyes on QB, don't take eyes off QB. I just don't, that's not happening with him. But he's capable, but it's not a true threat, take it 60, that kind of thing. So to me, it's diversity, misdirection, that kind of stuff in the run game.
So in your mind, you don't think Gunner's going to be factored into the running game for Georgia? You think it's just going to be an opportunity thing as opposed to a design thing?
Very much so. And I think back to 2022 Stetson. He didn't run in terms of a lot. He had a lot. I think he had 9 or 10 touchdowns that year, but it wasn't like he was heavy yardage, and it wasn't like it was, hey, 3rd and 1 in this situation, I'm going to make it a read play because I know if he does pull it, he can go get me 6, or goal line type stuff, like the Mississippi State play where he broke 3 different sets of ankles. against Mississippi State. Those situations, I think you're going, or QB draw Auburn. That he happened to take 65 or something like that because the Red Sea parted, but it's not one where it's a true part of the offense. It's more of a situational. Okay, I can use this, or at least use the threat of this in a short yardage, in a goal line, in a 3rd and 3. I'm going to go 5 wide, and if they play it a certain way, we'll check we'll almost go PRO, pass run option, and it's a QB draw instead of a pass. So things like that, I think that's what it's going to be. And plus, Kirby's kind of done this consistently, really, since Stetson took over as quarterback. He's not going to use it because he wants the quarterback to survive and play and not miss games. And Gunner's already shown that it's not like he's going to just find himself out of harm's way. He's going to put himself in harm's way just because that's how he's wired. So I think you're going to see it only situationally this year.
So what you're telling me is there's no quarterback power read on our own 25 with 2 minutes left in the game. And
no, well, so you talk about you mentioned the Notre Dame game. Go back to when you rewatch the Notre Dame game, go back to the play. It was right after they got the 4th down, like pass interference call. It was late it was in the 4th quarter. They're trying to make it a 1-score game. They got the PI on 4th down, and then they had a fresh set of downs. I think the next play, he missed a slant, threw a slant behind Bell. And then one of those plays in that sequence, it was a sort of QB counter, fake one way, go the other with the quarterback. You could tell that was not a team that had religiously practiced that or was used to practicing that play. It was just, it didn't look comfortable. It didn't look like something, because those elements, it's such a timing element and a rhythm to it, and you got to work on that consistently. And that's not something that's just been a part of their offense. And you could tell that was something that they didn't work on a lot.
Next question, because I sticking to this point and talking about the running back quarterback run game. Obviously, I do remember I found it. Actually, I was just searching through stuff, and it somehow popped up your tweet from December of Georgia running quarterback counter in the red zone in the SEC championship game. Obviously, that wasn't as successful. You put that play side by side with, I believe it was 1 versus Ohio State, because I know they did quarterback counter with Stet versus Ohio State in the red area, and I think they did the next game versus TCU too.
Yeah,
is that, I guess, in terms of do you see when they call it? You talked about the quarterback draw, that they, I think they ran that once on the first drive of Gunner in the SEC championship game, if I remember correctly. They called one. Does the style in terms of when they do call it, do you think that changes? Because I think the biggest thing that people notice when they turn on watching Gunner run and his runs that we've seen compared to Stead, obviously the speed's not the same. We're talking about a bigger body in Gunner. The fleet of foot's not there. Do you think that changes what they call?
A little bit. And I would say it's one where you maybe don't necessarily give it as a true read, put him out in open space. You give it more like the play against Texas, sort of on that far right. I'm thinking the far right end zone. I guess maybe was that Georgia's bench? I can't remember now, but where I think the Texas defender peeled back, made a great play, where it's almost like a lead play, and you have someone in front of him, a tight end, that sort of, or even a back sometimes. But I don't think you're going to see them where they're not going to put him in situations where he needs to have speed to avoid being hit. And it's more, hey, make one move, get what you need to get. If you can get more, go for it. If not, get the first down, take a fall, whatever that may be, but stay healthy. But in terms of the variation of what they call with quarterback run, I don't think you're going to see much different than what you've seen in the past. And maybe even, like you said, a little bit of a smaller sample size of those things.
Well, staying on the same side of the ball, but I have a different question, because a lot of us are excited about Zachariah Branch, the wide receiver we got from USC. Harrison and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, is that he maybe doesn't have the tape that would tell you he's going to be an all-world wide receiver, but I think in this offense he could be really special. Do you see that, or is that just me being wishful thinking?
You see flashes of it. Like if you look back his first 2 years at USC, especially as a returner, like that to me was where Georgia. I remember thinking last year how long had been since Georgia returned a kickoff for a touchdown, and I think it was like Isaiah McKenzie at some point was maybe the answer. I'd asked Patrick Garvin about that, and I think that was the answer. But you make an impact in the return game first. Like you have more 5 and 4 stars, blue chip guys than most everybody. Your special teams are loaded with them. You should go get home runs in that area. So that's one area I think he can bring that. But when specifically looking at him as a receiver, he has lad-esque traits from a movement skill and suddenness perspective. He's just in a smaller, he's not 5'10". He's not 5'10", 185 like Ladd was, that could potentially be on the outside, and you're seeing it in the league that is being played on the outside some. So I think you're going to see them use a lot more with him specifically. I think you're going to see a lot of 3-by-1 bunch this year where you got a single receiver, a Thomas or a Colby Young at the X, and then Branch is part of that bunch set just to get him and allow him to make quick moves, sudden moves, and get open space because he can. Like I remember I did an earlier on the website, a Film Don't Lie look at Branch, and there's some routes against Washington where he just leaves dudes 5-7 yards away where they're totally turned around. So if you can bring that level, like I think, and Harris and I were talking about this earlier on the vent, if he can be Ladd-like, or at least a mini Ladd, where you can put him outside, like think back to Auburn, Beck's first road start against Auburn, when Ladd caught, first down after first down on like 3rd and long early in that game. If you can use him in that manner, he can do those things. If he can't, then I don't know that I see him being much more than what Georgia's had with Dominic Lovett the past couple of years, where it's you get an occasional big play, you get occasional open middle of the field open, and you got some space to move, but just getting it to him and him doing stuff with it, I don't know. We'll see, because I know I've had a lot of people tell me that he moves differently, and there's a suddenness to him that they haven't seen in the building in a while. So we'll see.
I guess my question, when I hear you talk about going back to a lot of 3-by-1 bunch, the first thing that pops in my mind is it felt like, and this is just maybe looking back, so maybe I'm wrong here, and absolutely tell me if I'm wrong. It felt like early Monken years, pre-2021, Georgia was a lot more of a bunch team as opposed to spreading it out. Now, obviously, when I say spreading it out, not Tennessee splits, but it felt like early Monken years was a lot more condensed. Is that kind of like what you're thinking, envisioning this year? Does that go back to like more similar, a lot more condensed formations as opposed to spreading out?
I think in general, all of offenses are getting more condensed because defenses are just getting better, and they're getting more condensed because it's bringing lighter bodies into the box that now have to play the run. So I think that's part of some of that and what you're going to see. But, for the most part, formationally, outside of like Darnell Washington, to me, is the big differentiator with all this, is the things that they were able to do with him those few years versus without him the last couple years. That's where you've gotten some different things, I think, from them offensively. But other than that, it's a lot. It's so much of the same things that you saw in 21 and 22 with Monken that you're seeing now, or you've seen the last 2 years with Bobo at OC. 20 to me was the year where, if people think, all right, if you look back at the Monken as offensive coordinator type deal, 20 was the one where, because it was the COVID year, he comes in as the coach that year. COVID happens, all that. So now you've got the weirdness of that and how you're meeting and Zooms and all those things. That was the year where their offense was more him, I think. And then the following year, he gets back into the college game, like truly gets back into diving an offseason in the college game. Buster Faulkner comes in, but the following year, I think Bobo was there, maybe 22 as an assistant too. So a couple other people that come in the room that bring the college experience to that and blend Monken's NFL passing game with college concepts and run game concepts and screen, quick game, RPO concepts. That's where you've got the sort of best of all that, which to me was 22, because that was the offense to me that was as good as it gets that over the past sort of 4 or 5 years for them.
My last receiver question, I promise. We've talked about some of the older guys. Who, in your opinion, whether it be a freshman or a non-contributor off of last year's team, like a guy who really didn't get any run, could you see making an impact on this football team? So it's either a guy that was on the roster that really hadn't had a chance yet or an incoming freshman. Do you see anybody in that bunch that can make a real impact?
The one that immediately comes to mind is it Elias? Is that how you say his first name?
The tight end?
The 6'8" kid? Like, just because he's physically different than anything you have with that profile and that ability, because he looks like a receiver, even though he is sort of that a traditional tight end in that sense. He's the one to me that gets into that realm. Outside of that, I think you're going to see it's the transfer guys or it's the incumbents.
Okay.
I'm curious in terms of receivers, and I know we've talked on all day. Does it get you have guys, you have a Noah Thomas, you have a Colby Young. Those two guys are going to be your X, obviously. Well, I won't say obviously, but yeah, those guys, you're penciling them in to be your X. You have Zachariah Branch, who we believe will probably be a slot guy, unless, like you said, he can go improve to win on the outside a little bit more. Then there's Dylan Bell, who's a curious case, because at his best, which was 23, when he was able to move around, whether that was in the backfield, whether that was playing as a flanker receiver, off the line of scrimmage, opposite of whoever the X was that year. I guess I put in our season predictions article, I had him as Georgia's leading receiver. And I think that was it's a big bet in terms of that right there. Because once again, he might be getting touches in non-receiving ways. But how do you envision his role, I guess, going into this year? Because it seems like Georgia has, last year it was Dylan Bell has to be a 1A or a 1B for us. Now it feels like, hey, he could be a 3 or a 4 choice in terms of options.
I think in terms of route usage and for positional and where they line him up is going to be very similar. The thing that I want to see from him this year is the intricacies of playing the receiver position that I don't know that I saw from him. You've seen it in very, very small doses, but little things like a lean here to when you're breaking, a little lean to the right when you're breaking left, just to get the defensive guy off balance, create that little bit more separation. Like, think back to the very first play of the Texas game. RPO, Beck puts it right there. He misses that one, but it's the issue there was more so his route than it was his ability to catch the ball and do something with it. I actually feel confident in his ability to catch the ball and do something with it. I just don't see enough consistent route running from him, or having over the past few years, that says, okay, he can be and grow and take a leap forward as a true big time receiver. Now, if he comes in this year and maybe spending off season working on his craft and doing the whole private coach type thing and really dialed into that world, and you see that and you see him creating more separation, then okay, now you just got another guy who can go be a guy for you. But we haven't yet seen it to me consistently to this point.
I have a question for you about the offensive line, because last year I felt like talent-wise that offensive line was loaded with talent. But in my opinion, it didn't feel like the product on the field didn't match the talent in the room. So this year's offensive line on paper would seem to be a little less talented, but I have a feeling it's going to be more productive. What are your feelings on the collection of talent that we have on the offensive line last year versus this year?
I did not tell him about the post and event that he just kind of teed up for you. So this is genuinely his question.
My
Perfect.
fault.
No, it's perfect.
So
It's
first
perfect.
off, I have to ask. Hopefully, the answer is yes. If not, I might log out. No, Dan, are you on the vent?
Like since 1996, but I haven't logged in a
Okay.
long time.
Okay. All right. So we're good there. But no, so somebody, I'll sort of go back through this just to plug the vent a little bit. Here is, I forget who it was that made a comment, but my comment was offensive line play. You don't necessarily. Oh, I think it was the top four things, like the top four things that, or the top four players. And somebody said the entire offensive line, like, is their answer, is these players who need to go from good to great. And for me, I don't know that the entire offensive line needs to dominate. Not in today's sort of football and how football is. Now, if you have that and you have, Panay Sewell at left tackle or right tackle and Andrew Thomas at left tackle and Quentin Nelson at guard, like, awesome, go for it. But that doesn't typically occur. You usually have one or two. So Mr. Scott Mack there, he said, all right, not sure you can have a good running game with poor offensive line play, but run with the theory. Because what I was saying was, I think you can mitigate some of the offensive line play issues with other things. But I wrote this whole big spiel in the vent about what I think about offensive line play in general. I felt very Belichickian, I guess, in a way, with the way he's answered some of the random football questions. But it's a topic for me that is one that I'm very passionate about, because I think you're right. Is this supposition here is that they were individually more talented. By the way, the NFL draft told you that they were individually talented. Wilson was third round. Tate went in the second or early third, something like that. Fairchild was picked. Like, you had three guys picked with prime draft picks. And you look at last year, of the 32, there was 32 offensive linemen in the SEC that had, bring back the fullback. Yes. But there was 32 offensive linemen that had a PFF grade right at around 70 or higher. Georgia had 6. And to me, that's, while people rag on PFF and aren't the biggest fans of it sometimes because maybe they don't understand the grades, offensive line play is one where I trust those grades as much, if not more than any, because it's an individual play-by-play basis, and it's looked at to me, the right way to look at some of that stuff. So you had a talented group, but you had inconsistent play, you had injuries, and the biggest thing for me was you had one weak link. And that, like, as much as, Xavier Truss was a, veteran presence and all the things with that, and he was there and played and all that, he too often was I think he was the only one that was sort of below 60, which is the average mark for PFF grade. He was the only one there. And when you have a weak link on the offensive line, it just messes with everything. So I think you're right in that you might not necessarily be as talented, but you might not have the weak link, and thus you get better play. And that's why, like, for me, if you're looking for like players who, if they can go from good to great, change the trajectory of their season, I think Monroe Freeling is prime on that list, because one, he has the ability to. Like, he was as highly recruited as he was for a reason. He's played early for a reason. And he showed a lot last year, especially as a run blocker. But if he goes to elite as a pass blocker and you can just leave him on an island, that changes so much. It opens up so much for the coordinator. That changes a lot of things if he can step up his game as a pass pro guy. But the other sort of overarching point of all that, to be long-winded with it, though, is you have to scheme around that. And this is what we talked about earlier with the run game. Like, do you remember the last Ole Miss lineman that was drafted?
No.
At least drafted high. But are you afraid of their run game all the time? Yeah. Because of how they run it, because of how they constantly put a defense in conflict with either the pass or the QB run or misdirection. So, like, individual talent, they might not necessarily be there, but because of all the other pieces, they're still, because of how much play action lane Kiffin uses, they're some of the best pass pro numbers, all that sort of stuff. So there's ways to help the offensive line, and I think it gets back to my point about the running game. If you add more diversity and misdirection in the running game, you help your offensive line. More play action in the pass game, you help your offensive line. You do those things from a play calling and schematic sense, you make that not be a factor. You'd make it where you don't have an Ole Miss type game where someone can literally just make you not be able to do anything. So I think you're right in that you might get better play. And I also think the same is true of the quarterback position. You're not going to be as talented, but I think you might get better play this season.
I guess backing up on that, you talked Murner Freeling. Ernest Green obviously was a guy coming off the 23 was, hey, that's put him in the pen. He's your left tackle. Obviously, injuries were a problem last year. I think across the board, I think Xavier Truss was the only offensive lineman that did not miss a single game. Did not at all. From what you saw from Ernest Green, are you still confident, hey, that 2023 version of Ernest Green can come back, or heck, even maybe be better than that 2023 version? Or was it when you watch that tape and now having the added context of, hey, this is a guy that was playing with I believe it was his left shoulder that just was out of whack all year? Is that something you still have confidence in? Hey, Ernest Green can get back to being what we saw the year before?
If he's healthy. That's like, if he's healthy, like I'll never forget. I want to say I can't remember if he was an early enrollee, but I want to say he was. Mm-hmm. And I remember going to practice that spring and watching, and I was like, who's 71? He's really good. He moves different than everybody else. Like instantly you see it. And I'll not let that image out of my mind that if healthy, the kid can be a really good player. So now hopefully health, I'm not moving side to side. Maybe I am right tackle. I mean, ideally, I think he's probably better a guard than he is a tackle, but it's not like he's a bad tackle or he's not unfit to be a tackle. But get him healthy. And if he does creep back to what he was, I think a little bit more so in 23, then yeah, I think he can be that kind of guy.
Dan, if I could just follow up real quick from Ernest, and you might have even been on here. We've talked about the tackles. The guards right now, the interior, I should say, is a little bit more of a question mark. Obviously, with Ernest and Monroe, you're hoping Ernest can get healthy, as you said, and then for Monroe to take that next step. With interior, you have Michael Morris, who I think, correct me if I'm wrong, from what we've seen, there's obviously the flashes of good, and then there's sometimes a little bit inconsistent. He's coming into a full-time starting role. There's a battle between Michael Unai and Daniel Calhoun at guard. Then there's Drew Bobo at center. How are we feeling on the interior of that offensive line?
I think it's not going to be a minus. It is likely would be my answer to that. And when you're not a minus, you're a positive. And Drew Bobo at center is an interesting one because I think I can't remember when it was that I tweeted something like, hey, if this is what you get this season from your center, and it was something like 800 snaps, this is the PFF grade, these are the pressures allowed, things like that. And all of the people that responded, even on the vent, were like, sign me up, take it. And I was like, that was Cedric Van Pran's first season as a starter. I put his numbers as a first season as a starter. I think it was the 21 season, right? So and if you get that from him this year, that's more than adequate. I don't think he's going to ever get to elite. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's putting up 85.0 plus PFF grade and really showing out dominating. But if he's a above average, consistent, no snap issues, and they're down in, down out, take it.
I'm going to switch sides of the ball if you don't mind. Everett, I think most everybody is fairly confident Everett's cornerback number one, and he's going to be absolutely fine on one side of the football. Obviously, nobody's ever going to be perfect, but I think he's going to be more than adequate on that side of the football. Who in your mind, if anybody, is really the leader in the clubhouse with that number 2 spot, and how good do you feel about it? Because I know that there's a couple options, and I'm a big, just for full transparency, I think that Ellis Robinson's going to be really, really good. But we haven't had the chance to really see him very much. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just I have high hopes for the guy. So, and I'm not asking you to tell me he's the guy. I'm just saying, in your mind, do we have somebody who's really taken a hold of that second cornerback role?
No, because 7 played. And like some of the stuff he put on tape last year was, I mean, potentially some of the worst effort stuff you've seen.
You talking about Ellis?
No,
Daniel.
7. Harris.
Oh.
Like he played. Ellis didn't. So no matter how that works, and I know Kirby got asked about that a lot. Hey, he's working health and then getting better in practice, all about practice, things like that. Somebody's got to give you something there. I think you've got to find somebody who is at least solid. Because going into the year, and by the way, I'd written about this before last season. Like you go back through the Kirby history. Hey, QB or cornerback 1 was cornerback 2 the previous year, took a step up, became cornerback 1. Cornerback 2 comes in and is at a certain level. It was almost the same, like over a 3-4 year period there, where when Lassiter was CB2, when Ringo was like when each of these guys was CB2, like their numbers and what they allowed and coverage grades, things like that, it was all very similar. And you got a drop off last year. And I mean, that's one. The defense to me is the biggest thing that I am not necessarily concerned with, but want to see from Georgia this year, is because I've been going back through all the games and looking specifically at defense over the past week or so, and what teams are doing to them on first down. Like when you think back to last season, it's upwards of upper 60s in terms of percent completion, a lot of big plays, a lot of first downs on first down type stuff. And I think that's a function of, one, the cornerback issue that we're talking about there, but also, two, some of the lack of interior rush, lack of sort of playmaking, I guess, along the defensive line. So the defense as a whole is one where I'm just very intrigued to see, because, by the way, you're going to see new guys in a lot of different places, especially on the defensive line.
Let me follow up real quick. So this is just a selfish question. So now, obviously, nobody gets to go watch practice. I mean, if you do get to go watch practice, you get to go watch them do yoga stretching. I mean, it's not real. In your mind, what do you think is preventing a guy like Ellis? Now, I mean, if you look at Ellis, he was like the top rated corner we've ever gotten in recruiting. He was the number 1 overall consensus corner in the entire nation. What do you think it is that is preventing him from taking that next step? Or is it just one of those things where in Kirby's defense, it takes time?
Health is always, if Kirby says, well, hey, he had a shoulder issue. Okay. Because if you can't practice and you can't perform in practice, that is over the years of going to practice. And there are times where I am able to go and watch and see and things like that. That it's the most consistent of all consistent things. Kirby demands effort, demands your absolute best in practice. And if you aren't giving it there and earning the time on Saturday in practice, then you're just not going to play. So if it's not health, then there's something missing from a practice perspective that is not getting the guy on the field, because it's demanded. And I've had conversations with coaches across the country, and some that are in even the high school realms. And one good friend that coaches in California does a lot of this type stuff too. It's like, how does he get these guys to play this disciplined? I'm like, it's just demanded. it's utterly demanding. And if you don't bring it, and you don't bring it every day, and you don't bring the discipline every day, you don't play. And it's unlike anything to me that you see anywhere. And so, as much as we want to see it, like I'd have loved to seen it at Star. Just tell the kid go cover somebody man to man. You got that guy. That's all you got to do when you go in the game. Don't think about anything else. Just cover that guy. I'd love to see it too, but for some reason we haven't yet. But I do think I think you're going to get, much like you had a rotation with Harrison, Humphrey, and even Humphrey Everett a little bit the previous year. You're going to get that kind of rotation early, and maybe it's one of those things where you just let the cream rise to the top type situation.
Brent, I think, because Dan and I had talked about this before, in terms of any kind of position battle, it's always seemed like the trend has been the more senior, the more experienced player gets the start at the start of the year. Well, I think back in 2022, Dan Jackson was the safety on the field next to Christopher Smith. It wasn't until Malachi Starks came on and obviously made the Oregon pick versus Oregon that he took the spot at safety as the starter. You look at the year before that, it was Keely Ringo who was playing behind Amir Speed for, I think that was like a couple games before Keely Ringo took over. Is this just another situation where it's, hey, not only just corner, but I guess across the board, it's probably going to be the veteran, the guy who's been there longer that gets the start at first? Is that trend you think sticks?
I think barring knowing that you have a player who has to be on the field, a la Brock Bowers in 2021, I think you're right. And by the way, I think what you just described is exactly what Steve Sarkisian did a year ago with Quinn Ewers. I think he knew Arch Manning was better. I think Quinn Ewers knows Arch Manning is better. I think more talented and all those things. But it's like, hey, this guy's been here. He's going to play. Your turn is next year. And so like I think those things are very much matter to some of these upper echelon coaches and just old school coaches in general.
Yeah, Kobe makes a good point here. Both are NFL caliber players. I guess in terms of putting into words, the high ceiling player doesn't always get the nod immediately. Has to go earn it.
Highly recruited, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Next question, and I guess we'll not wrap. Well, we're getting close to wrapping it up. Let's speed or get through some other positions. We did corner. Let's talk defensive line. I know we talked about it at the top of the show. Dan was talking to me and was asking me about. We were talking about the defensive line pre-show. Guy he brought up, who I know you and I have talked about over text, was Xavier McLeod. When you talk about the interior of that defensive line, I don't know how many snaps Georgia lost off the top of my head. I want to say they lost probably nearly 1,000 snaps between Nazir Stackhouse and Warren Brinson from last season. Probably not actually, because both those guys missed time. Well, Warren missed time, but you're losing somewhere around there in terms of snaps. Now you're going to, I believe it's going to be Kristen Miller, Jordan Hall. Both those guys have had some injury issues that have kind of prevented them from playing all 12 games. Then you look at Xavier McLeod, who was a contributor last year. Behind him, you have a Nnamdi Agboko. There's a lot of unknown there. But on I guess the three guys that I think everyone's expecting to play, what have you seen from them? And let's start with McLeod, because I think McLeod's a interesting case, because when you go back, I know you mentioned it, when you go back and watch the last 3 or 4 games of last year, McLeod is a guy that flashed from game to game.
And when we look at that, what do I watch? I watch, can you get off blocks? Like, Kristen Miller is a great run defender. Strong, plays everything, like sound, technique, all that sort of stuff. He's doesn't consistently get off blocks and make plays. He's more of he's what you think about almost to me like what you get with what Stackhouse was a couple years ago, where it's just this guy's not getting moved and pushing back the pile, that sort of thing. McLeod is somebody who gets off blocks. And if you can get off blocks consistently and create some form of disruption or cut that wasn't meant to be made, things like that. All right, come play for me on the interior. Because that's when you think about Georgia's defense, who has freedom of movement? For the most part, those interior defenders, and usually it's one. One's usually, hey, I'm here, I'm the anchor, and the other potentially has some level of I can go one way or the other. I can just beat this guy, like a la Jalen Carter. But it's usually those interior guys that have more freedom of movement. The edge guys, hey, it's technique, it's making sure we're in right position, making sure our leverage is correct, all this sort of, we don't want QB outside the pocket on a rush, that kind of stuff, especially on early downs. So those interior guys have that freedom of movement. And McLeod is one who, to me, just showed that he can get off blocks. And if you can do that, you can be disruptive, you can play. And it's just, can we see it more consistently?
Yeah, so I'm so happy to hear you say that, because when you hear guys talk about the defensive line, it seems like McLeod gets left out a lot. And when we were talking earlier, I was just curious as to why he gets left out, because he just seems like he's going to be a really good football player. And then another guy that I know Harrison likes is JJA, and he's a younger player but talented. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be as bad on the defensive line as people want to make it out to be. I think it's just new names that you're going to have to learn and you're going to have to get comfortable with. I think there's going to be a rotation. I don't think it's going to be one or two guys out there the entire game. And I think it's going to hold up really well. So, when I hear people just say the same names over and over again, I think it's more to do with the people just don't know the names because they haven't seen them play yet. And I have a lot of optimism for the defensive line. I mean, Coach Scott does a great job with his defensive line. Look at the guys they brought in. Everybody wants to point to Jordan Davis as being, this great player. But he was a 3-star when he came in, and he didn't get a lot of playing time because he was too heavy and he was out of shape, and they had to get him into shape. So he has a good story, and the end product was amazing. But somebody got him from the beginning to the end. So you have guys that are coming in talented. Georgia doesn't recruit players that are not talented. So I really feel this defensive line is going to be very, very productive. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's the feeling that I had. And I guess it always feels good to have somebody validate your opinion.
Very true. Very true. But think about what you're talking about there and what the sort of goal for the fan in a way is. What's the goal now? Goal is to win championships.
Absolutely.
It's not to be really good. And like it's to play for and win championships, because you the coaching staff and in the past editions have set that expectation. And that's when you look at these details and be like, all right, can this guy get to here? Like, he's here, good, really good. Can you get to great? Because great wins me a championship. Really good gets me, in round 2, or gets me beat by Notre Dame. Like whatever that threshold is. So I think any of those things, there's going to be a lot. There's not going to be bad. There's going to be really solid play, but it's who steps up and really gets into that really good or elite category. And that's why, to me, like, I already know what Christian Miller is. Great run defender. I don't think he's going to, if he does give it, be as a pass rusher there this year, that's gravy, because I know how good he is as a run defender and an interior player in general. But that's one, like McLeod is one where it's like, okay, if he takes a leap and becomes someone who can get after the pass a little bit, be disruptive, a la the Devontae Wyatt type role, where you don't necessarily get a lot of sacks, but you create a lot of disruption. That's, again, things that lift the ceiling of the team.
I don't want to hold you for too much longer. So we'll
I'm about to be potentially live in 2 different places, because the podcast that I've been doing with and we'll be doing actually this season, the Seawall Get Ball with Pollock, is about to run here in a little bit. We got a chance to talk to Hugh Freeze today. Ooh. So that was cool.
Man of the hour in terms of media coverage right now in headlines. At the moment.
Yeah. And he started off, he's like, yeah, a lot of people care about my golf game.
Golf Digest certainly does.
Yeah.
Brent, I know we turned this as a season preview, and it is in the sense of like, hey, we're talking personnel with Brent. But I'd be remiss if we called this a preview and didn't go ahead and get your take on the full 12-game schedule. It's interesting to me when you look at Georgia's schedule this year. Yes, you still have an Alabama, you still have a Texas, you have an Ole Miss on the schedule. Then you throw in Florida, Auburn, the traditional rivals, who you'll never completely overlook. It's interesting to me when people talk about it, like a la Phil Steele talks about it and says, "Oh, I don't have Georgia as an underdog in a single game." It's interesting to me just how the switch of the home and aways it feels like from a national sense, Georgia's schedule isn't as threatening as it did a year ago when we were talking about it in July. Is that kind of the same sense you get in terms of like, hey, when I look at this schedule, I'm not going to pin it in 10-2 as fast as I would last year potentially with the road games?
I still think I will. Like, to me, I think when we did our picks, I'm pretty sure I did. Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. Now that I think back on it, but like it feels like 10-2 to me, where you split the Texas, Alabama. You get 2 of the 3 at home, Texas, Alabama, and Ole Miss, that were 2 of the 3 you lost on the road a season ago. You get 2 of those 3 at home, but then I think there's just going to be a trip up somewhere else, like an at Auburn, even Tech at the end of the season. For Florida potentially, like it's where, like, it's just the nature of the beast of the grind that is that schedule. You're gonna, unless you're way here, both from a quarterback sense and everything else. But that's what, to me, college football has become. Like, that was when we were getting ready to do the SEC preview for the season. You're looking at all these teams and you're just like, okay, they can lose 4 games. They can lose 4 games. They can lose 3. They can lose 4. Like, these teams are. It's not like the differentiation is where you've got 6 or 7 that are way up here, and then everybody else is kind of down here. No, it's getting more and more like this. And when that happens, now it's home versus road. Now did you play a very physical game the week before, an emotional game the week before, and now you got to go on the road? Did you somebody hurt? Is the weather a factor? Just all the random stuff that happens in a football game. Those things come more so into play when the talent starts getting like this, a la what is the NFL.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. My bad.
I was going to say, when you look at the schedule, there's not a lot of relaxed moments on the schedule. I mean, every single team, not every single team, because we know that's no lie, but there are a lot of teams on this schedule that are capable of winning one game. And, one of the things that we always talk about is that when Georgia, same as the way it was with Alabama for years, is when they're on their schedule, you circle that one. That's one you want to go get.
Yep.
So I think you're 100% right when you say, like, 2 losses is almost the norm now. Like, I mean, it's almost like you're going to have to recalibrate your brain system with this new playoff. It's like you don't have to go undefeated through the regular season and have a chance. But ultimately try to win the SEC and get in the playoffs. But, like a game like Tennessee, it's early in the season. Is that there?
Yes, at Tennessee, 3rd game.
Right. So, I mean, listen, I don't ever want to say we're going to lose to Tennessee, but I mean, that is a losable game. And, you talked about the big games finally being at home. Alabama is that one that's on the schedule that until I see it consistently, you just don't have a lot of faith in it. And then Texas has got 2 losses hung on them last year. So if you don't think they're not going to come in here pissed off trying to prove a point, you're wrong. So, I mean, like, 2 losses is almost to be expected at this point. I just don't know where they're going to come. And I think that's exactly what you were trying to say, is it's very difficult to predict exactly where they come. But I guess my question for you is, can we freaking beat Alabama?
I'm not as one. I think there's it's a thing. Like, it's a mental thing. It's a whatever it is. It's definitely a thing, because when you play one way against everybody else, and then you play a different way against that team, even in the previous SEC championship game, you played defense a certain way, and then now you go play a game where Marvin Jones Jr. and what was the kid that transferred to
Damon
Arkansas?
Wilson.
No,
Xavier
Story. Like, and those guys play a majority of snaps, and Jalen Walker plays 11 snaps in that SEC championship game. Like, weird stuff happens, right, in that game. But I don't like Alabama. To me, is one where, like, thinking about their team, I have just as many questions as I do any other team. But it's them, much like Georgia this year. They might not be as talented at quarterback, but they might get better quarterback play. And if they get better quarterback play with the receivers that they have, especially with getting the transfer kid from Miami, like, to go along with Williams and Bernard, okay, then maybe they have more of a Kalen DeBoer team, because last year they put way too much on Milroe's shoulders. But he owned Georgia because it was early in the season. He was coming fresh as could be, coming off a bye week. Versus later in the season when he's carrying that load as a runner consistently, you just saw that he was, he ran out of gas. Like, he had a week off before LSU. He goes and dominates LSU. And then the next week, loss. So, like, can Alabama be more consistently offensively? And plus, I see a lot of good on Alabama, much like Georgia. I see a lot of good. I don't know what great is there. So, maybe one or two guys, but are they difference-making guys? Like, I don't know. So the key for me is the part that matters. It's versus. It's not at. It's versus, as in home.
Last thing, then we'll wrap it up. This is a fun segment. It is one of Dan's favorites. I didn't even tell him I put this together. Blind draft. So Brent, I don't know if you've watched before, or if you've watched the old Rylan Goody, and I believe it was, first year was Zion Logo, I think it was. They had a blind draft where they would, pick 5 things or 8 things, whatever, without knowing what's coming, and you rank them. So today's topic, I have 2 sets of 5 lined up for you and Dan, is Georgia players. I put best. Now, obviously, best is relative because everyone's going to have a different opinion, but best Georgia players of the 21st century. Now, I have 5 names. Now, all 5, somebody, I put these together, all 5, as in somebody will likely, if you talk about one of the best Georgia players of the century, one of these guys' names will be there.
So no duds.
No duds. There is no Brendan Douglas. Like, everyone here is going to be legit, probably in the conversation. I will say there are no quarterbacks. I left quarterbacks out of this. But everything else besides special teams. Sorry, Dan. Brent, I will let you go first. First name, and then we'll alternate. So Brent, then Dan, and we'll rank them like that. Brent, AJ Green.
So my goal is I got to put him somewhere no matter what.
You can't. Okay. Yeah, you rank them without knowing who's coming next, and then afterwards
we can talk about. And so there's only 5 names, though. You've only given me
5 names.
Okay, I'm going to go 4 with him.
Dan, what say you?
I mean, the guy could potentially be an NFL Hall of Famer, right? I mean, close.
By the way, he was the 4th pick in the draft.
Yeah. I'll go put him right in the middle at 3. I could justify him at 3. I mean, come
on. Here we go. Dan, I'll let you go first this time. Brock Bowers. Go ahead and just rip off the Band-Aid there.
Man, I don't know if you have my favorite player on this thing, so I'll put Brock at 4. I don't know.
Brent?
He's got to go. I think he's got to go to 2 for me. And now that's the interesting part is who else, and I'm saving 1 for who I think might be on this list.
Next one, Todd Gurley.
I'll go
I know
first.
Dan I know Dan's throwing a party over there.
Number 1.
I'll say I'll never forget seeing him at practice. I got to know Coach Van Hallinger really well when I first lived here, and he had me out to practice one day, and Gurley walked by me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine what it's like to try to tackle that kid. I'll put him at 3.
All right. Well, I'm hoping I have Brent's number 1, and I think I do, but I'm not sure.
I don't know because these are all offensive guys.
Okay,
might not.
Next one, Nick Chubb.
Go ahead, Brent.
I guess he's got to go 5 on this list. Yeah. I'm probably not going to like who's my number 1 is, but we'll see.
All right, yeah, put him at 5. Although, I mean, you could make an argument for any one of these players. So, yeah.
I'm thinking this might be the number 1 for Brent if he had his choice, but I'm not sure. David Pollock.
So that was I assumed you were going to throw that name in the list, and given the fact that I do a podcast with him and he's my next door neighbor, I have to put him at number 1.
It worked out.
It did work out. I got lucky. He would probably rearrange this order differently. He would probably put Bowers 1.
I'm curious, Brent. Who was it that you were saving out for? Is there somebody?
I thought he might be on this list. So I'm like, all right, if he's on the list and I don't put him first, I feel like that's a bad neighbor.
Gentlemen, how we feel about the list in terms of not knowing who comes next? Obviously, if you had your chance of rearranging, how would it go? I mean,
with no quarterback, like I instantly went to Stet in my head. So,
listen, I've watched a lot of football in my lifetime, and I think Todd Gurley. I mean, not including Herschel Walker because I was like 1 and 2 years old when he was running the football for Georgia. But Todd Gurley was the most dominant player I've ever seen. He's the Ronald Acuna Jr. for me, where it's just every time he's involved in something, I couldn't take my eyes off of him. I just I mean, I was at the Buffalo game, his first game, and I was standing in the corner of the end zone, and he ran it right into on the kickoff all the way down. And from that moment on, I was just sold. I'm like, this guy is, I would have loved to seen a healthy 3 years at Georgia.
So what season was that? Now that thinking back, what year was that? Because the reason I remember that, and the reason I even went to that game, was it was my oldest son's birthday, and for his birthday, I didn't have to work. We went to the game, and when Gurley returned that opening kickoff, it was coming right at us.
Yes,
we were in that end zone. So yeah, I remember
2012 was that year.
Yep,
I was in the right corner of that end zone, and he was running right at us. And
we might have been sitting beside each other and not even realize it.
Well, we had a friend that was connected to the program, so we were standing on the field, and I just remembered I was just like, oh my gosh, we get to see 4 years of this kid. Holy cow! I mean, it's just it doesn't matter, but he's my favorite player of my lifetime at Georgia.
I guess wrapping up, Brent, for the folks who don't know you, I'm going to go and gander that everyone who's watching does know who you are, but just common courtesy. Plug your stuff. What do you do? Tell us about your role. I know your job by day, and then also your job by, I guess, afternoon. Well, I guess it's kind of all around, depending on when football's being played.
Yeah, it depends on the. I mean, it becomes a 7-day-a-week thing once you get into the season. But UGAsports.com, people got to subscribe to that because we got to get and beat all the other people that Shannon Terry tweeted about that are ahead of us now. So do that. The See Ball Get Ball podcast with David Pollock. We're going to do that this year. So that's actually potentially going to kind of creep into and slow down with the film don't lie type stuff. We might back off of that. It's going to be more probably written this year than it is video. But yeah, outside of that, just talk football on the Twitter account that's listed there and do the college professor stuff by day.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much. You were extremely gracious with your time. I thought you gave us some great answers and very thoughtful. And you even played some of our silly little games with us. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Yeah. It's fun. Always fun. Anytime. Harrison asked, yeah. I said I'm in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. Like I said, when I first had a conversation with Brent, actually the first one was on the phone. And even then it was kind of like you walk away feeling like you knew something more than you did like maybe the 10 minutes before you had the conversation. So that was an experience. Seeing him in watch warm-ups was also an experience. Maybe Brent, maybe that's what we need to do, a dog vent giveaway. Whoever wins the giveaway gets to watch warm-ups side by side with Brent Rollins. That was an experience.
It was, so take it back to me as a kid. So my dad just this year, retired from coaching high school football. This year would have been his 50th. So he didn't get to 50. He got to 49 years coaching high school football. So when I was a kid, as soon as I could basically walk and talk, second, third grade, fourth grade, I was the spy pregame. So the defensive coordinator would have me, like, because you know how all the high school teams, they put all their dudes and then they go run their plays in the line, so you can't see what they're working on pregame. So I would go and watch, because they're like, who's the kid's not paying attention, and I'm telling the defensive coordinator, hey, they're in two tights, they're running it, like. And this was something I did from like the time until I started playing high school football there. So yeah, I enjoy the sidelines before the games very much. So it's always fun.
Well, I won't forget it, because we were down on one end watching the Texas quarterbacks. It was Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers throwing running after the other, and it was just the certain way that the ball came out of their hands that was different from the other. Brent pointed it out pretty much immediately. I was like, ooh, hadn't noticed that, and then. Man, I wish we had gotten to be next to you at Pro Day, because I know that would have been an experience seeing Gunner throw with an info ball for the first time since the season.
Yeah, hopefully he's worked on that a little bit. Hopefully he's worked on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you so much for doing this, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. If you're new here, make sure to like, subscribe. We will hopefully be back to every Wednesday at 7:30. I know we've been lacking on that a little bit. Shout out to Kobe Pierce, former long snapper at UGA, graces us with his presence anytime he's available as another co-host. Brent, appreciate you. Dan, thanks for being here as well. And for those, we'll see y'all next week.